you have enough weight on your shoulders than to have a chip. And so I always live my life without having a chip, even though you have a good reason to have one, because there are disadvantages in this life. But again, accept that is your lot, is what you can do with it. And to me, that makes you that much better if you can overcome.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be the journey.
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and his name is
The journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is the journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The journey. The journey. The journey. The journey.
The Journey Initiative is generously supported by Nike's Black Community Commitment.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today, just like every other time, we got a Memphis icon that we know you're gonna love. But first, we're gonna get to our quote. And today's quote is from a civil rights icon. Nelson Mandela is his name. You should do some study about him if you haven't. But nevertheless, Nelson said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Well, I know how education has changed my world, and today's guest will probably corroborate those same things, but education opens up doors that you didn't even know was there. So don't take it lightly. Make sure you take your books and opportunities to learn very seriously. But today, this Memphis icon is a transplant, straight out of Brooklyn, New York, graduate of Michigan State and Pepperdine University. He has the 3 E's. He's an educator, an entrepreneur, and an executive. Welcome to the show, Brother John J. Webb. What's up, JW?
Hey.
How you doing, man?
Always good. Got to make it good.
I hear you. I hear you. So listen, man, we're going to start back at the beginning.
Okay.
Tell us about the early years in Brooklyn.
Okay. So grew up in a place called Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
Bed-Stuy, very tough area in Brooklyn.
Okay.
So, for that, when people talk about crime in Memphis, I don't pay it no mind. It's a cake and a walk in the park for me.
Well, that's something we got in common.
Yeah.
I actually grew up on Clifton Place in Bed-Stuy. I was there for a little bit of short time in my childhood.
So,
go ahead.
So there, I had a mother and father. My dad was a carpenter.
Okay.
My mom was an educator.
Okay.
She was I'd say a middle school teacher.
Okay.
So people always wondered how the two got together because they were total opposites.
Right.
And, based on your quote that you just mentioned, I think Mandela must know my mom because that's all she espoused. And she somehow convinced my sisters and I that we should read books.
Right.
Instead of being on the playground all the time. And if we read and we did well in school, that was our ticket out of where we were, our circumstance.
Okay. So the household was your mom, your dad,
my 2 sisters and myself. I'm the oldest.
Okay.
And my dad, unfortunately, he was counter education. Mm-hmm. He was orphaned when he was in younger years.
Right.
And he was in Alabama, and so he had to go live with his uncle in New York City, which is how he got to Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And he had to work to earn his keep.
Right.
So therefore, there was no time for going back to school.
Yeah, no
so
time.
My dad ended up never finishing any type of schooling, was functionally illiterate. And I used to have to read the TV guide to him. You get the TV guide, this little book back then.
Right.
And he'd say, come home, Johnny, what's on? Okay, Dad, Gunsmoke.
Right.
All these different shows.
MASH.
Yeah, whatever you want to watch. And he'd tell, okay, put it on that channel, whatever.
Okay.
And so he really had no use for education because he figured, hey, if you're good with your hands like him,
right,
you could earn a living.
Right.
And it served him well.
It's funny, all the attention that's today put on, that trade, understanding the trade, plumbing, electrical work, as well as carpentry.
Yeah.
We kind of going back to those old ways in a way, in a sense,
So because of that, I was forced to make a choice because my dad was in one ear saying, boy, stop wasting your time with those books. And my mother was saying, make sure you stick with these books. And what really made the choice was the time came where my dad was, unfortunately, he had a drinking problem.
Okay.
And he was a bit abusive. So my mother decided she couldn't take it anymore.
Okay, hold on. Don't tell that part. We're gonna open that spot up. Right now, what decision did you make as a young person that you look back on now that had a lifelong impact, even though you may not have known it at the time that it would have an impact at the time?
Well, I think it ties to the education
Okay.
that you talked about, because I think I owe everything to that.
Really?
But the other thing I owed is that my mother, who was basically my role model, was she said, John, I don't care how successful you ever are, be a good person.
Okay.
She goes, it would kill me for someone to tell me that you'd achieve all the success, but you weren't a good person.
Right.
And so I never forgot it, and it's how I live my life.
How different are you, John, from the person you dreamed you would be as a young person?
I couldn't dream that high. I mean, when you're young, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Right. My goal, when I came out of college, my goal was if I could ever make $40,000 a year, I'd own the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That seemed like a whole bunch of money back then.
Oh, yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Now you're just millions, man.
So now, so now I'm north of 40,000.
Right, a little bit.
So I'm
Just a
doing
little
okay.
bit.
Yeah.
Tell me, John, what's your why? Why you get up every morning and fight the good fight?
To me, I like the challenge.
Okay.
I never like anything easy.
Okay.
You know, that's why I don't mind working. A lot of people say, man, why are you working? Because why don't you just cash out? And I said, I enjoy the fight.
Right.
And to me, that's invigorating to me. And also, who's going to help bring the others along?
Right.
And I think we all pave a path. And I figure, I'm not ready to check out yet. I'm ready to keep paving, keep moving, keep doing things so that other people can join at the top.
Reminds me of a Muhammad Ali quote: "Service is the rent you pay for your time here on earth." And I know you are involved in a lot of service projects.
Almost
you
definitely.
really believe in giving back, and that says a lot about who you are. When did you know you was gonna be okay? At what point in your life did you say, I can handle this, I can do this?
So I've been fortunate because I feel like I'm a combination of my mother and my father.
Okay.
My dad was street smart,
Okay.
super tough.
Right.
My mom was educated, but good with people. And I feel like I've got the combination of both of them. Because that's what got me through Brooklyn is the street smarts, but also the education and the other things is what allowed me to transform into a new life.
Okay. All right. I got one for you now. When's the last time you remember you got a whooping as a young person?
Oh, that's an easy one. That's an easy one. So my dad, you didn't play with my dad.
Oh, right.
Okay, if he said do, you do.
Right.
Or there were consequences.
Right.
And they weren't ones you wanted to endure. So I'm sitting on a stoop next to, next to our house in Brooklyn, and my friend's house, and we're talking, having a good time.
Right.
My dad comes out, he says, Johnny, time to come eat. Come on in. I'll be right there, Dad. So I proceeded to start talking, and now I forgot that he had come and called me out.
Right.
So 30 minutes went by,
Oh my goodness.
and I'm still there. And all of a sudden I hear, Johnny. I see my dad standing in the stoop. I'm like, man, I'm coming, Dad. I'm like, man, this is not going to be good because he's going to think I deliberately disobeyed him,
Right.
that I didn't forget. So I grabbed my stuff, and I'm coming up, and here he is. He's like, comes down like middle way down on the stairs.
Right.
And I'm actually kind of amazed that he's as calm as he is, because normally he would be cussing me out.
Right.
And we're walking up, I said, Dad, I'm sorry. And he goes, didn't I tell you to get in this house? And what I didn't realize was he had one hand behind his back, and when he reached up, he had the belt already in his hand.
Oh man.
And I said, the only thing I can do is make a run for it. So I shot past him up the stairs, but like every second step he caught me. Pow! Jump up a couple more stairs. Pow!
Oh,
Didn't I?
man.
Boom!
Oh,
So I
man.
jumped, got to the top, shot in the house, and my grandmother was doing the dishes. And I went right up under her skirt.
Oh wow.
And he was still trying to whip me, and my grandma said, you're whipping my legs, leave the boy alone. So I might not be here today if Grandma hadn't been washing the dishes that day.
Oh wow. Wow. Well, listen, we got one more question before the end of this segment. I ask all the people, all the brothers, when was the first time you realized you was a black man? Hold on, before you answer. Listen, we're going to be right back on the journey where Brother John J. Webb is going to tell y'all when he realized he was a brother. Stay right there. This is The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
Success in life is not a straight line. There are twists and turns in everyone's life, and the more you know about their story, the more you'll understand the process. KUDZUKIAN Media Group proudly presents The Journey, a show that features successful black men in Memphis telling their stories of their lives and the ups and downs they've encountered on their ultimate road to success. We believe The Journey will encourage young men and help them see that life is a journey. Watch The Journey, hosted by me, Larry Robinson. Brought to you by the KUDZUKIAN Media Group in partnership with the Delta Boule. Welcome back to The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson. I told you we had a great one for you today. John Webb is our guest. And before we left, John was talking about when he realized he was a brother. John, care to elaborate more?
So we're going to go back to first grade. And my sisters and I, we attended Catholic school.
Okay.
And the reason being, the New York City public system was not that good.
Right.
And my mother being educated, she wanted us to get the best education we could, but she couldn't afford private school.
Right.
So the next best thing was Catholic school.
Right.
And she could afford that barely, but we got a better level of education.
Right.
But as you might imagine, there weren't too many black people in the
Right.
Catholic schools. So first grade, sitting there in class, and it was middle of the day, and the teacher looked outside, and she saw a few black kids coming across the playground.
Right.
So she says, "John, come over here." So I come over. She lifts me up. She says, Who's that? I said, "Well, I don't know." She goes, "Come on, you know." I said, I don't know. I've never seen them.
Right.
And she was frustrated. She's like, "Well, why are they out there?" I said, "Again, I don't
Strike
know."
three, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also noticed that there was a few white kids that were walking around, but she wasn't concerned about them.
Right.
So just then in my mind, I was like, okay, so A, she thinks all black people know all the other black people.
Right.
We also know what each other's doing.
Right.
And also, obviously, she's not concerned about the white kids that are walking through.
Right.
She's just worried about the black kids. Wow. So I realized then there's going to be some challenges.
Right.
You know,
Right.
not angry, whatever, but just took mental note.
Right.
And obviously, you know, as time went on, had many other examples like that I had to deal with.
As an executive, you're probably one of the top executives in the city representing a tremendous healthcare brand. How have you seen race come into play at this stage of the game?
I don't see it as much in Memphis.
Okay.
You see it in other places. You know, when you travel, there's I've had many an occasion where people assume someone else is in charge.
Right.
Not me.
Right.
That's just that happens day in, day out. You know,
Yeah.
It's like, they're like, "Oh, you Webb?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this guy was Webb."
Okay.
But hey, it comes with the territory.
Okay.
You know, to me, through my actions and what I do, hopefully that breaks that down.
Absolutely.
And so people are more comfortable, and I don't endure it as much as I used to. So
do you feel that your race has ever impacted your level of success?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've had jobs that I was almost sure to get,
Right.
that I was not given because I was black.
Okay.
And it was obvious, you know, because in particular, it was a German company that I was recruited at the local level, and they wanted me to run this area.
Right.
And the minute they took it to the parent, Germany, they said, "No way, no how." They didn't even try to sugarcoat it. It's like, no way.
How do you get past moments like that?
Well, I think I've always understood that we all have a cross to bear.
Right.
It might be race. You could be a physical handicap. It could be upbringing. It could be anything. So I'm not going to sit there and wallow in it and say, "Hey, woe is me," or "woe is the black race." This is our challenge.
Right.
We'll deal with it. Others have challenges too, and I'm not going to let that stop me. And in fact, it makes you better.
Absolutely. We're going to rewind it back. Now, you brought up a bad memory with the whooping. I ain't even gonna take you there. Tell us a fond memory of back in Brooklyn, man, Bed-Stuy. It was one of those memories that bring a smile to your face today.
Okay. Well, you mentioned in the beginning that I'm an entrepreneur, which I am. So it started when I was in grade school.
Okay.
My mother was getting ready to throw out a suitcase. And I said, Mom, I want to keep that suitcase. And she's like, why? You're not going anywhere. I said, I know. I said, but I have an idea. I said, I'm going to open a traveling candy store. She goes, what are you talking about? Store. I said, well, down the street, a few blocks from us, was a wholesale candy place.
Okay. Where
you could buy, at this time, now I'm going to date myself, candy bars at that time in the store were 10 cents.
Okay.
The wholesale candy store, you could buy it for like 3 cents.
Wow.
And so my idea was, I'll buy these candy bars for 3 cents, sell them for 7, and I get 3 cents.
Right.
So I'm making money.
Right.
And I took some cardboard and I put slats in there so I had compartments for my candy. So my mother says, first of all, John, they won't sell to you because you're not a retailer. And of course, I didn't know what that was.
Right.
I'm like, well, I'm going to show them. I'm going to go in there with my suitcase and I'm going to show them. So, so off I went with my suitcase, empty suitcase, and a $20 bill. Okay. And I walked in, and everybody was laughing. Like, this kid, he wants to buy some candy for his traveling store here. But they said, well, you know, son, we can't really sell to you because you're not a retailer. You have to have a license.
Right.
The manager comes out and he says, he seems pretty enterprising. Let the kid have the candy. Because they're thinking they'll never see me again, right?
Right.
So I got $20 worth of candy, loaded up. 3 days later, I was back with an empty suitcase and more money.
What a story.
My journey might have been different, except I had 2 sisters, younger sisters, which I mentioned earlier. My youngest was not in school yet.
Right.
And my suitcase did not have a lock. So she was eating my profits while I was at school. But the fatal blow was my other sister, who was in school with me. One day, one of my friends said to my sister, isn't it great that your brother sells us his candy for under store prices? And my sister says, well, you know, John's making money, right? And they go, what do you mean? He says, yo, he's buying it for 3 cents.
Oh, wow.
And so he's selling to you for 7. And they're like, well, that's not right. He's ripping us off. So they come to me and they say, hey, man, you've been ripping us off. I said, what do you mean? I said, I'm providing a service. I said, where else you going to get the candy for 7 cents?
Right.
I said, I'm the one going to get it. I'm the one working. I said, I got to get paid for my efforts. Everybody wins.
Right.
They're like, no, we're your friends. You should sell it to us for 3 cents just like you bought it for. We ain't buying no more. So they shut me down.
Wow.
So I told my sister this day, you know, you cost me. You know, you owe me. I could have been candy mogul. I wouldn't have had to peddle the stamp insurance if you wouldn't.
Oh, man. Tell me about your teen years, John. You know, grade school, you know, middle school. What was that like?
Okay.
Now, where were you? Were you still in Brooklyn?
So once I got into high school, we were upstate New York.
Right.
Okay. My mother got a professor job.
Okay.
A place called Brockport State.
Okay.
So that Brockport is a suburb of Rochester.
Gotcha.
So went upstate. I thought, you know, this is uncivilized, no subways. I wasn't what I used to, but hey, this is where we need to be.
Right.
And in hindsight, it was probably the best thing for me because being in Brooklyn, it was just, you know, temptation every which way.
Right.
So this kind of got you out of that. It's a little bit safer, and I think my mom knew that. It was better for all of us to be outside of the city.
Right.
So got up there, again, you know, I'm a sports guy, so I was playing football, basketball, baseball.
Right.
And enjoyed that immensely. Had a lot of good friends. But still, being in those suburbs, upstate, wasn't like being in Brooklyn.
Right.
You know, again, you encountered prejudices and things like that
Right.
that you had to deal with. The teachers, you know, I, fortunately, because of my grade school, coming up through Catholic school, I placed in all the accelerated classes.
Right.
They didn't believe it. So when I checked in my sophomore year, I was in a English class called 10A. 10A meant accelerated.
Right.
Well, at that school, most of the blacks were in remedial.
Right.
They weren't even in the regular English class, much less 10A. So teacher, female, middle-aged woman, was standing at the door and greeting everybody when they came in. Hey, welcome to 10A, welcome. I got up to the door, she put her hand across the door and said, where you going?
Right class.
Yeah. I said, 10A, right? She goes, are you sure? I said, that's what it says on my paper. She took it out of my hand, didn't even ask for it. She just took it out of my hands, looks at it, and she said, this ain't right.
Wow.
So I said, okay. So she calls, there's a phone in the hall. She calls on the phone and she says, hey, I've got a student here. He says he's in 10A, his paper says 10A, but if you were looking at him, you would know he's not in 10A.
Whoa.
And I'm standing right there. And I'm like,
Whoa.
okay, we'll see how this goes. So I hear her, and obviously they said, no, he's in 10A.
He's in 10A.
So she gives me the paper and says, go on in. No greeting, no nothing. And she was angry,
Right.
So I knew what was coming.
Right.
So she's passed out the books, and she said, okay, for the first week or so, we're going to read the story of Helen Keller.
Okay.
And I'm going to assign parts for people to stand up and read these parts. I already knew what was happening.
Right.
She gave these bit parts to all these other kids. But the one black kid in there, I got Ann Sullivan. Well, Ann Sullivan is the biggest part of all in
Right.
the Helen Keller story. I said, fine, I'll take it. Because I knew I could do it.
Right.
So I wasn't worried about it.
Right.
So she was trying to show me up in front of the class, and it didn't work.
Wow.
But to her credit, by the end of that school year, I was one of her favorite students. And to this day, I don't know if she ever recalled how she treated me and how she felt. I just knew that I had changed her by my behavior and how I handled it.
That's good
and
stuff.
the fact that I belonged, that she could see that.
Right.
And then hopefully the next kid that came along that looked like me, hopefully they got a different reception than I got.
Your transition, how did you get to Michigan State?
Okay. So at Michigan State, I placed very well in the SATs and tests for college.
Right.
So I was getting letters from all over the place
Right.
from people. Michigan State was one of them. Also, I was going to try to play a little baseball.
Right.
I couldn't play football, couldn't play basketball. I didn't have the size to play at a Big Ten school, but baseball
Right.
you could try to get away with it. And also, I liked the enormity of the school.
Right.
I'm still Brooklyn kid at heart. I liked having a lot of students.
Right.
45,000 students felt comfortable. Going to a small school didn't feel well.
Right.
My second choice, if I'd stayed in state, was probably Cornell.
Really? Okay.
But I said, you know what? I'm gonna go out there, and if I don't like it, I'll come back.
Right.
But I thought for maturity's sake, it'd be good to be out of state in a way.
No HBCU in that
Too
conversation?
small, man. Like I
Oh.
said, I want a big school.
I hear you. I hear you.
So a lot of schools didn't make the cut.
I got you.
So go to Michigan State, and as soon as I stepped on campus, I said, this is where I need to be.
Right.
All the people running around, and tried to play baseball. I got hurt my freshman year, which in a way I had to turn something negative into positive, because when you're playing a sport at a major institution, you have to eat, drink, and sleep that sport.
Yes, you do.
Well, I had decided to take engineering.
Right.
Engineering commands a lot of time and
A
effort.
lot of time.
And so baseball would have been more of a distraction.
Right.
I knew my future didn't lie in baseball. My goal wasn't to be a pro ball player.
Right.
It's hard for an athlete to admit that they're not good enough to go to the next level.
Right,
But I
right.
knew what the reality was.
Right.
I said, but my goal is going to be this education. That's what's going to take me forward, not this baseball. So I gave it up.
Now you have children.
Yes, I
You
have two.
children.
I have two.
You have two.
I have a daughter and a
okay.
son.
What are they doing?
So my daughter just turned 25.
Okay.
And she's in D.C.
Okay.
She works for a congressman.
Okay.
And she's been moving up steadily. She's going to pass me in a minute. I mean, she's doing really well. My son, he took hospitality and tourism in college.
Okay.
He actually went to Michigan State, so I was able to continue my legacy with him.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter told me it's too damn cold. She went to Florida State, which
I don't blame
can't,
her.
I can't blame her.
I'd have went south myself.
I couldn't argue with that.
Right.
So he worked for the Grand Canyon in
Right.
Arizona. So both of them doing what they want to do, and both are extremely well. I've just recently seen both of them at different events.
Now, your relationship with their mom, same mother for both? Or
Yeah, same mother for both.
were you married?
Sure, I was married for 24 years.
Okay.
And unfortunately, things did not work out past that, but we're still amicable. And
How does that rate on your scale of things that you possibly regret in your life, or is it a regret?
I would say it's a disappointment. For me, I never thought about not being married. You know, I was in it for
The long
the
haul.
long haul, and unfortunately couldn't make it work.
How
But,
did that change you as a man?
like every other adversity that I take, I look at it this way: things happen for a reason,
Okay.
and it'll reveal itself at some point. It may not be evident right now, and that's how I felt about this. So I didn't want it to disintegrate, but
Right.
by the same token, I'm not trying to hold on to something that's just not going to work.
Right.
And so therefore I had to let it go.
Greatest successes, John. What is something that you sit and you point when you look at or you think about? It gives you a lot of pride.
I would say I've had one international assignment in my life.
Okay.
And I was working for a company that bought a Canadian company that wasn't doing very well.
Right.
And they came to me and asked me if I could take it over and fix it. And I said, you know, I love the challenge. Let's do it. So I moved to Toronto. So I actually lived in Toronto for 5 years. Probably know Canada better than most Canadians, because you pick a hockey city. We had an office, and I was traveling all the time. Love Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal.
Oh man.
You know, Calgary, Edmonton. I've been to all of them.
Okay.
And I love my experience in Canada. But when I got there, the company was 7 out of 8 in their category of insurance.
Right.
And the company I worked with in the U.S. was always ranked number 1.
Right.
So they weren't even thinking about being number 2, much less being number 7.
Right.
So when I got up there, I met with the team and I said, 7 out of 8, how does that make you feel? And their answer stunned me. Their answer was, at least we're not last. And I said, we don't aspire to be not last.
Right.
You know, we shoot for number 1, we'll see where that takes us.
Right.
And those that are on board with that will stay, and those that aren't will have to go.
Right.
And so traded out some of the team, but gave people a vision of what we could do. And when they bought into it, in that 5-year span, we were number 1 by the time I left.
Wow.
So for me, but the culture was the key, building the right culture. And to, you know, fast forward, once I came back, because of expatriate laws, you can only stay up to 5 years because they want Canadian executives running Canadian companies and U.S. executives running their companies. So you had a 5-year window, unless you changed citizenship, which I was not going to do.
Right.
But so I came home, had 2 kids, and a couple years back, right before COVID, I said I want to bring my kids up. So I just called up one of the people who used to work for me and says, hey, by the way, bring my family. If anybody wants to meet for a drink,
Wow.
can you come out? You know, and I wasn't expecting much. You know, maybe 4 or 5 people show up. Man, they had a room full of people.
Wow.
And it was, you know, touched my heart that
Good
they
stuff.
still had that feeling, and my kids were like amazed. They were like, Dad, you haven't seen these people in like 20 years,
That's a
and they
full
come out like
circle
this.
moment right there.
I said, well, it shows you if you treat people right, they never forget.
Right. Right.
So,
Going back to Brooklyn, you walk in Saturday morning, little John is sitting at the table watching cartoons. What would you say to little John about the life that's coming before him?
well, I don't know if I could tell them much, because then you get too anxious. You're not patient, right? You gotta go through what you go through. By the way, you didn't ask me. I thought you were going to ask me what cartoon was I watching. It was a show called Johnny Quest.
Oh boy, that's my show.
I
love
loved all
Johnny
the
Quest.
serious cartoons. I didn't
Right.
you know, I didn't like Bugs Bunny and some of the other, you know, slapstick
You had to
type
learn
stuff.
something.
Man, I wanted a storyline, and
Right.
for the same reason, I actually collected comics when I was a kid. So I learned a lot of vocabulary by reading Marvel comics, because Marvel comics were more sophisticated.
Yes.
And so Daredevil, you know, Spider-Man,
Right.
all those. I was busy reading those. I was the first one in the store when they came out to
Okay.
buy them. My mother used to call them funny books. She says, why are you reading those funny books? I said, Mom, it's educating me. She didn't believe it, but it was true. They were. I would write down the words that I couldn't, that I really know what they were. I
Right.
could kind of figure it out.
Right.
And then I go to the dictionary after it and read and learn.
So wait a minute, what would you say to him? What would you tell that little dude?
I would say, do the right thing, and you'll be right.
Got it. All right, so last statement. I want you to talk right in that camera.
Okay.
And there's a lot of young men that are looking at you right now, and I'd like you to leave them with a Webbism that they can take with them after they watch this video.
I would say, to me, you have enough weight on your shoulders than to have a chip. And so I always live my life without having a chip, even though you have a good reason to have one, because there are disadvantages in this life. But again, accept that is your lot, is what you can do with it. And to me, that makes you that much better if you can overcome the challenges that we have. And so for me, be the best you can be good to people, strive to be the best, and you'd be surprised where it could take you. Because like I said, I could never dream as high as I am today when I was as young as I was. And hopefully by people seeing me and other people like me, they know what's possible, which I did not know.
Fantastic. You've been watching The Journey. We are going to keep bringing these iconic figures that are right here in your community every time. I'm Larry Robinson. For my guest, John Webb. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your story and your journey.
Appreciate
with
you having
our
me.
viewers and listeners. Till the next time, I'm Larry Robinson. Take care.
Thank you to our partners at Nike's Black Community Commitment. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the KUDZUKIAN app from the App Store or Google Play. Or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the KUDZUKIAN Network.